is the carton d'invitation, and the exhibit was held in Chinatown. So as you see, because we're in Montreal, we're in Quebec, everything is bilingual, and you will notice some signs in my images are French, which is very particular to the Montreal and the Quebec realities. Now, the exhibit, this is actually an image of Gilbert Duclos from that era, and the Nat King restaurant is still there, but I think it might not be. A lot of these images were taken of areas which don't exist anymore. And I know that, and I've heard talking to Morris and listening and looking at all the product, all the information given by Karen on the exhibit, that there's this thing happening in the majority of Chinatowns across North America. They're disappearing. They are in old neighborhoods. And what happened in Montreal, I think the process started much earlier than elsewhere. And when we were doing this project, they had destroyed the majority of the extensive the Chinatown that used to be. Okay, now successively, Kwok, who we worked with, he was teaching, I believe, at Concordia at the time, Concordia University. He's initially from Singapore, and this book that was produced due to the images we took and other images that he worked with other people too, was printed in the University of Hong Kong Press in Hong Kong. So it's very interesting that, basically Singapore, Montreal, Hong Kong, the links that happened at that period. Now I'm going to start with some of the images that were in the actually exhibit and weren't. And I just wanted to show you, I took this out because I find it interesting. These are my coworkers and Kwok at the in Chinatown, actually discussing, I think it was a celebration. It could have been the Double 10. I don't remember which ones, because we did photograph a lot of celebrations at that period when Kwok was there. And that's Gilbert Duclos in the middle. I have one, Marik and Kwok de Laurentian. That outside is a beer, it doesn't even exist anymore. So you'll notice that some of the images, these are okay. I start this image. I'm sorry if I talk fast, but I think nobody can actually point me. A corner, very small area of Chinatown, the Pagoda Park, it was called back then. I think it is still called, although the pagoda disappeared at one point. Apparently it's stored somewhere in Montreal. It would be interesting to find out where. Now, what I wanted to point out, corner of La Gauchetière and Saint-Urbain, is the process had been going on for years of reducing that, prime land, just grabbing it up. And it started actually with this building in the background here. That's the Hydro-Quebec building in 1962. It's actually the headquarters of the Premier of Quebec when he's in Montreal. And on the right here at the back is the Complexe des Jardins, which was finished in 76. Now, all these buildings basically destroyed neighborhoods. They razed the neighborhoods. And they resemble, what would I say? I've seen images. I didn't use them because I don't have the rights of that area back then before they destroyed. And it resembles a bit Lower East Side in New York. It's like very, 5-story, very cramped. And it was considered a bit slumland at the point. It is an area before the Chinese immigrants moved there. It was an area where all immigrants lived it's because it's very close to the Montreal harbor. So, it was a Jewish neighborhood at one point. They even destroyed synagogues and Jewish schools when they built these buildings. And it was taken over by, a lot of the Chinese community back then. And then successively, the Chinese community moved out into other areas, like it is happening, I imagine, in other cities. On the bottom here is Guy Favreau, and this was the massive Government of Canada building, which just cut the whole thing. I mean, everything disappeared after that. So it became very small. It is extremely small. It's a couple of street corners, but it's very lively. Like I imagine a lot of like other neighborhoods on Sunday, it comes alive. There's a lot of people that go down there. So that's basically, and all the celebrations that are happening, they still are going on, although there's less and less and less people living there. Now, this one is a backyard. This is part of the exhibit too, on Saint-Dominique. Does not exist anymore. It's, the story of Montreal, a lot of alleys, and I'm an alley walker. So, these are things that I imagine a lot of people never even saw, but it was interesting to, I like the colors in this thing. There we're building Guy Favreau. This is La Gauchetière, Wings Factory. The white and red building initially was a school, like way before, like I think at the beginning of the 19th century. So, and you see it is very old neighborhood. And Guy Favreau basically put an end to a lot of people living in Chinatown. This is just images as part of the exhibit too, a lot of colorful, and then you'll see in Morse's photo too, a lot of reds. So, and more firecracker. This is, I think, one of the celebrations where there's a lot of firecrackers. These stores don't exist anymore. So they're gone. You can see it's very old neighborhood. Mr. Chu, it's part of the exhibit too, was reputed to be one of the only sculptors on the East Coast that was actually doing Chinese sculpting. This is his shop, which has disappeared. Well, this was done in 1982. So you're talking about, 30, 40 years ago almost. So I can understand. To me, it's like yesterday. I remember going in there. That happens when you're a photographer and you photograph something, it's just embedded in your mind. So there's this process. Oh, I have to ask Morris if that happens to him. But you remember these things. And when you go back, even some of the images for this show, I actually opened a box of negatives. I hadn't opened it in 40 years. So it was some things I didn't remember. I had to ask Marik. But this is part of the exhibit too. It's in the community center. They were preparing food distribution because upstairs was the Sunday school, Chinese school. There was a lot of classrooms. I think there was 4 or 5 classrooms I went into where various ages, people would congregate and come into Chinatown. That's what regrouped a lot of families too, was this center, the community center, which still, did the Chinese crafts and mostly Chinese, the writing and the languages that the kids would learn. So this is some of the images I extracted from the series I did. Some of the inside the school. It's funny because it denotes the school desks. I was brought up on school desks like this, and we even have the hole for the ink for those who are too young to remember. We used to put the inkwell in the hole and stain our fingers and put ink all over the place. So just some images taken in the school with their little books. This is an image taken of the outside. It was during a celebration, 1976. And I didn't know back then that I would eventually actually go inside the Hum Association. So these wise old men looking out the window, things happening. La Gauche side is a very active street. And it's been the street where there's been all the celebrations, the parades, even like in the 40s and the 30s, fundraisers for China, because when they were fighting Japan, it all happened on that street. It's and surprisingly, they has been kept. They haven't destroyed it. The things that do destroy those buildings now, part of Chinatown is fires. So, fire, it goes, they never replace it. Now, this is inside the Hum Association. The second floor, I just took a picture up from outside in the stairwell. The second floor was the union, they call it the syndicat, I guess I translate into union building, the union area. So there's just areas inside the second floor of the Hum Association. Okay. And now I'm going into the third floor. The third floor was actually the meeting room where they would have, I guess they would meet, they would celebrate. And I remember walking into this room and feeling somewhat strange because there was 2 activities. They didn't seem to be related happening at the same time. There was young people on the left, busy working, and then there was these men in suits and ties eating on the right. You'll see, I just did a close-up of these young, very happy people. And I think they must have been a bit uneasy because I arrived with my camera, the tripod and everything, and started taking images. And you can see there is an unease, especially in the gentleman on my left. And the gentleman on the right is, a little bit more open to, I remember the gentleman on the left, it comes back to me. He just was not looking at me. So, well, it could, I can imagine this white little fresh kid, coming up with a camera. But I was always accompanied. Every time we went into the associations, Kwok would be there. And there was always this discussion happening. Unfortunately, I couldn't understand. It was done mostly in Chinese. I don't really remember if it was, or I couldn't tell if it was, probably not Mandarin back then, most probably some form of Cantonese although I knew a lot of older women living back then in Chinatown, the ones that Marik photographed actually spoke Toisanese. So there was some languages, it depends from areas from which the immigrants hailed from. So this is an image outside taken of the Nationalist League. I think I removed the other one. And I worked successively in 93 for the Chinese Film Festival. I was doing administrative work, writing grants and being a liaison officer between the government. And I remember at one point sitting in front of an administrator, government of Quebec administrator, and he looked at me and he said, why are the Chinese why are they always fighting? And I said, well, there's like 350 languages or more, they don't. And I said, the country that big. And he was surprised, as if he didn't know, although he was in charge of actually giving money to the community groups. But I think, it was a lot, people had and that's what it is. It's this non-knowledge of communities, especially a lot due, I think, to historically the Catholic religion or the Catholic Church really separated the Quebecois, the French Quebecois, from anything that didn't speak French. So, and, even though a lot of the immigrants were Catholic, they were sort of like pushed towards the English side of the, especially the schools. This is inside. It's not a very sharp image, but I just wanted to show it to you. This is a sneaked image. I opened the door and took the picture and fled. So it wasn't one that was part of the actual preparation images. This is the Centre d'Amitié Chinois in the Friendship Society. And when I took, I think, pictures, yes, the stairwell. And if you have seen the exhibit, Karen, and it was stressed, there was 3 levels of the houses. The bottom floor was the businesses, the second usually floor were the rooming houses, and the third floor, the association. So I took a photo of the stairwell, very old buildings, you can see. The stairs are worn away, it's creaky. This is inside the family association, the Centre d'Amitié Chinois. Sorry if I don't have the translation. And when I was there, the day I was there, they were actually dealing with immigration issues with people. So you can see people sitting and lining up and talking. So now this is the Les Herbes de l'Orient, one of the pharmacies on Saint-Urbain Street. And in the back, cutting some herbs, preparation for, okay. The Hong Kong tailor. Was, I believe, on I don't remember if it was on Saint-Urbain. I would have to ask Marik or La Gauche, but I can tell by the numbers. It was on Saint-Laurent. I can just tell because of the numbers of the street. Saint-Laurent, the street, which is the center of Chinatown, cuts Montreal in half. On the west side, it starts 1, and on the east side, it starts at 1. Montreal is divided in very straight lines, old feudal system. So inside this is the actual tailor, the Hong Kong tailor. And we went in, I think the 3 of us were there then, clock. This is the Épicerie Chinoise on Saint Laurent. So I'm just going through a lot of the images. It just shows it has changed dramatically. Okay, the Taiwan Épicerie. And I just pulled out this is 82. So you can see the prices back in 82. I don't know if it was the pound, I can't tell, or it wasn't by kilo, most probably back then. Oh, it should have been. I think we had changed systems back then. Okay. This is one of the yards. It's a municipal yard on Saint-Urbain, where, they stocked municipal hardware and stuff, and actually had the decoration of, to make sort of like trying to blend in, but it really didn't blend in. It was a huge hole in the Chinatown. It was installed. There had been buildings there. I saw old images. This is part of the destruction that happened. This is from inside the gate, and you can see the pagoda on the right here, on the left, I mean, and the actual Guy Favreau being built. This is the La Bourse de Montréal, Place Victoria in the background. And over here is the old Montreal. So you can see the architecture here, the old architecture, and what's coming is Guy Favreau, which is huge government building. This is the lot where we were before, the wing manufacturer. say, and the La Gauchetière in the background. This is before they start building, when they had finished basically tearing down everything. Okay, whoops, sorry. This is in 82, I think 82, before they paved it. Now it has become a street areas where there's no traffic. It's a piéton. It's only to walk, foot passages, and you can see the cranes in the background. What is happening. This is the What Fun video, and it's actually, you can see the Guy Favreau. It's coming up in the background, successively going up. This is the Pagoda Park that you saw the first image. This is actually in the Pagoda Park. So the pagoda by then had gone, and they slowly transforming everything. But you see, people occupied every part of the neighborhood. This is the Sun Yat-sen Park before it was transformed. Now they have built, it's nice. It's a little park on the corner of Clark and La Gauchetière. But as I was saying, you can see, denote it is in Chinatown, but it's the Festival Chinois du Bateau Dragon. That's what I mean in a sense. The signs will be in French. Some more images taken. These swinging gates have been they don't exist anymore. I thought they were so cool, but they removed them in the transformation of Chinatown. Celebrations could almost be a copy of what's happening now. Dragon dance. Okay, this is the Sun Yat-sen Park before it was transformed. But I chose this image, although the quality is it was raining. It's because of the bells, the telephone booths, very particular. I think they have also, I don't know if Bell kept them, but I think a lot of the furniture, the urban furniture was kept by the city of Montreal. They hoard them somewhere at one point. We'll have to discover. During the festivals, where they actually came out with picnic tables. The Bienvenue, the Welcome Cafe, doesn't exist anymore. On the other side was the Nanking. Just images I took. I'm going to go back to this image. I find it interesting because of the dynamics happening. You're a photographer, you have your camera, you're right there, you're close. I always photograph with a wide angle lens, so I was relatively close to people when I did images. But you see the two different types of interaction you get sometimes when you photograph people. The young man in the middle looking at me like, what are you doing? And the other one just, a bit shy, a bit excited, laughing. So this is a factor of a lot of social documentary photographers. Sometimes you put your camera out and you could have somebody throwing something at you. It happened to me once in a market. Somebody threw a carrot, hit me right in the forehead. So actions you always have to get, the approval especially when you do street photography. The Yonke Ipsri. Now, I think this image also was in the exhibit. I saw there was a sketch of this too that had been done much earlier than 82. During one of the celebrations, a lot of the images will change colors. Okay. Another time in the celebrations, it's funny because the sign here, it says no firecrackers in this area. So, in the background, you'll see why. It's really a China store. So, but it's cute that they would actually point out. I don't know to what point. I think there are still, but not as much. There used to be a lot more firecrackers. There's probably kids going in there to buy firecrackers for the celebrations. And just how's my timing is. I think it's good. Yes. Okay, more images of areas and storefronts that don't exist. This is definitely on La Gauchetière. And I remember the initial image, what the caption was, before the fire. So, and as I said, I mean, what really replaces a lot of the things in Chinatown, because I don't think they're allowed to build in certain areas. Although now I realize what is happening is what is going up is like, 10, 15, 20 stories high. So it's like more and more encroaching on the light, on everything that's happening. View of La Gauchetière. This is probably done around 1980, but you can see this cars. This street now, cars are not allowed. This is the Pagoda Park on the left-hand side. The Odeon Cafe, which really was a sleazy really sleazy bar, and it was and I just took a close up because that is actually a close up of the window. It was a topless bar and this little Buddha in the middle here. Okay. And the singer, which happened a lot into the bars and the more on no, this is on Saint Laurent. Relatively newer, but Herbe de Chine. It's more areas too. This restaurant doesn't exist anymore. It was the cafeteria of the Nanking. The Nanking was a second story restaurant, and this was the cafeteria down. It was very early. If people wake up early, I mean, you could grab, breakfast at 6 in the morning there. So it was a place I used to visit a lot because I went out a lot early in the morning. Just areas. I chose a little bit of series, part of the series to show that because there wasn't, even in 76, 70, 80, 82, there wasn't a lot of children left in Chinatown, but I did manage to photograph some, a little bit, probably, I don't know if these are actually children living there, but probably maybe of the proprietors of the businesses. This is definitely on Saint-Dominique. There were children living there. And I even was fortunate enough to be, you can see on early in the morning, a school bus picking up kids. Now you do not see that. First of all, the street is closed to traffic right now. And I still go down there early and there's no children left. I think when there's no children in the neighborhood, that sort of denotes what is happening. I mean, I figure if the generations coming up are still living there, there will be continuity. I know that even the businesses in Montreal Chinatown, this is the Pagoda Park. The businesses in Montreal Chinatown now have reverted. And I was talking to Medic, just this week, and there was even a taco place that opened. I was scandalized. And so it's she's. It's like, what is happening? Well, that's it. This is a back of a restaurant. Very happy people working there. So they all came out and talked to me, and it was nice. Okay, this is the construction happening on Clark Street. That import test is still there. That one exists. It still exists. But you see the kids, it was like, you wouldn't see this now. Right now, every time there's construction now, they have 8-foot fences. Nobody can walk in. But I remember kids used to play up and down in the holes. There was hardly any railing or anything to stop people from playing. Even this image, which is actually the end of the demolition, it was in 76 before they were demolishing. I mean, kids were playing everywhere. There was no fencing, which is very different to now. You can't approach these areas. I mean, you almost have to, every time we go walking and try to get into these places, it's like they have security guards. Images done at night of the Welcome Cafe with the construction going on in the street. This is actually, the Guy Favreau is in the background where the crane is. It's on the left is the Palais des Congrès being put up. It was put up in 2 stages and it completed in, 2002, but it started in 83. And this is, again, the same image, but there's people on the street, the women. It's women you get early in the morning, older women, older people, I guess. The construction happening. This is what I mean. It's like, if you think of now, they wouldn't allow people there this day and age. Well, back then, people, the construction workers, the machinery, I can understand safety-wise. Now, I'm ending with a couple of images, which is basically, you'll see the Wings factory, the area. On the left-hand side is Guy Favreau, part of the Guy Favreau complex. It's actually the residential part of the Guy Favreau, because they did build apartments and in the back end on the La Gauchetière. And the government offices are 1 block up. Okay, and this is the area looking east, and the gates, one of the 4 gates. Every entrance of the Chinatown had a gate. So, and the residential on the left. And I think I finished with the, this is another one here, just to show you. And I finished with this exhibit because I worked for the Chinese Film Festival and we put on an exhibit. And this is the flyer. Well, it's a huge flyer. It's like 10 by 10 of the exhibit that we did. And I used the images that Maric and that we did back in 82 and 83, went into the archives, found a lot of work and a lot of archives in Montreal archives of Chinatown and of this photographer called Conrad Poirier that was they incorporated, I visited because of the connections with the families and people that I worked with in the Chinese Film Festival. And we put this exhibit outside. So it was in the Sun Yat-sen Park on panels outside. It was one of the best exhibits I've ever participated in the sense that people, that was active, people were coming up and there was things happening, people recognizing people. It was interesting. We were lucky and fortunate to have good weather, but it's always good. The connection is much more there when you do public things. So, and I successively, when I worked for other festivals, and I always tried to do things, whether on fencing and everything, very public to get a participation much more than you would in like, you know, a regular gallery. So that finishes my end of things. So, hi. Sorry, did I go on too long?
No, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you for your thoughtful presentation and your time. I'm going to now pass it right over to Morris. So I'll introduce Morris. Morris Lum is a Trinidadian-born photographer and artist whose work explores the hybrid nature of the Chinese-Canadian community through photography, form, and documentary practices. His work also examines the ways in which the Chinese history is represented in the media and archival material. And Morris's work has been exhibited and screened across Canada, the United States. Morris is currently working on a cross North America project that looks specifically at the transformation of the Chinatown. So thanks so much, Morris, for joining us here today, and over to you.
Thank you, Jazz. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'm just going to share my screen. Hang on one second. So I just want to thank the team at the Griffin Art Center, to my fellow co-exhibitors and presenters, as well as Suzanne and Jazz, and of course, Karen Tam. I would like to acknowledge the diversity of the First Peoples of the area that I'm speaking to you from and recognize the territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island and around the world, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to work and to live on this territory. So today I'd like to talk to you about a project I've been working on over the last several years entitled Tong Yin Gai. Entitled Tong Yin Gai, which is the Cantonese translation for Chinatown. Tong Yin Gai is a photographic series focusing on the evolution of Chinatowns throughout Canada and North America. Over the course of this project, I've had the opportunity to visit the following cities: Victoria, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Houston, New York, and Boston. The work investigates the current state of Chinatowns as they transition from being a once bustling community hub to a skeleton of what they once were. Some of the reasons for the decline in the Chinatowns can be linked to the fact that the Chinese have outgrown their original circumferences and expanded outwards. So I'm just sharing a couple of images from the series. They're in no random order at all. This is the Hong Kong Kung Fu Club. This is the interior. The image prior to this was the exterior of that space, and it's on Dundas Street. And then this is a Noble Seafood restaurant. It no longer exists as that restaurant. It's a different restaurant now. So now pseudo Chinatowns can be found in the suburban sprawls of the major cities throughout North America. Networks of Chinese communities are being built more organically, where necessities like language school and job support can be found more easily. As a result, original Chinatowns in the major cities are facing a number of obstacles. So I'm just showing you right now just some images from Google of new suburban Chinatown developments in Richmond, Richmond Hill, Markham, and San Gabriel Valley in Los Angeles. So one of the reasons why I was really interested in looking at the urban Chinatowns, the first Chinatowns, is because of some of these articles that I was reading, and thinking about, what happens to Chinatown when they're sort of no longer necessary for new immigrants to come to. I mean, they can choose the option of going to the suburbs. So a lot of these articles are starting to come up as I was working through the project, and there was this desire to sort of look into Chinatown and to see what was happening. So I just want you to hold this image here of the gate for just a moment as I turn to this next image. So this is actually the same gate, the same space as the gate here, and it no longer exists as of 2018. So I was in Edmonton in May of 2018 to document the site of the Harmony Gate, which no longer exists. For me, it was pretty surreal to sort of see the erasure of the gate. It was sort of like seeing the erasure of Edmonton's Chinatown. The reason why the gate was removed was because the city had approved a plan to build an LRT just along the street here, which is 102 Avenue. The gate was dismantled and put into a storage space. So yeah, like as I've progressed throughout this project that I've been working on for the last little while, I'm seeing, dismantlings of certain things within these various Chinatowns. For me, this project really began in 2012 by observing the changes of the Chinatown in my hometown of Mississauga. Seeing these changes made me want to examine them more closely. So this is the Royal Dragon Chinese restaurant. It was originally built as a Sun Sun Chinese restaurant when the Mississauga Chinatown was built in the 1970s. This particular restaurant was actually where my cousin had her wedding reception. And it was one of the few Chinese restaurants that was big enough to actually hold wedding receptions or New Year's celebrations. In 2012, I noticed that the doors of the Royal Dragon had closed. Over the next year, I kept tabs on the progress of the space because I was interested in seeing what might happen to the restaurant. So a year later, I went back, and the facade of that space came down, and all we're left with is this sort of white wall. Not at the time, I really didn't know what was going on. I tried to speak to the property manager to see if there was another restaurant going in, but I didn't get any further other than that. And then I went back in 2014 and I saw this new development, this sort of new facade going up. And then on the side here to the right, you see this sign here says Blue Lagoon. So this is the new restaurant that's going into the space. And here it is in 2015. So it's the Blue Lagoon Seafood Master. It's a different cuisine than the sort of traditional Cantonese banquet style restaurant. It's more about, like seafood. And it's definitely talking a bit about the shift of immigration to Mississauga's Chinatown. So seeing this also inspired me to want to build a larger project about the original Chinatowns in urban areas throughout Canada and North America. For the rest of this talk, I'd like to focus on my process of documenting these Chinatowns and to look at some of the procedural adjustments I made along the way. So the beginning. In 2013, I received funding to travel across the country to research and record Chinatowns throughout Canada. I decided to begin by visiting Canada's oldest Chinatowns, Victoria and Vancouver. When I got to Victoria and Vancouver, I essentially hit the ground running, photographing anything and everything in Chinatown, which resulted in a chaotic plethora of images. Looking back, I realized that many of the images that I produced lacked some focus and clarity. So I decided I needed to organize, what I was looking at and what I needed to focus, my research on. So in order to do that, I came with a couple of categories to help me sort of focus when I was going to Chinatowns and wanting to take photographs. So I came up with these loose categories here: alleyways, family associations, lost spaces, and spaces in flux. So I'm just going to start talking a bit about alleyways. So one of the distinct features of Victoria's and Vancouver's Chinatown is that they maintain their network of hidden alleyways. Hidden alleyways at the turn of the century were necessary for the Chinese to get around. So this is an image of Jane's Tea Shop. It's not actually an alleyway, but the only way that I can enter the alleyway that I'm going to show you next is through Jane's Tea Shop. So the entrance to the alleyway of one of the entrances to the alleyway is through the back of Jane's Tea Shop. So this is inside of Jane's Tea Shop. And this is the back of Jane's Tea Shop. So I walked essentially through that red door and came out to the back alleyway, which is hidden from the public. So you can't really access it unless you had access to one of these buildings that the alleyway is connected to. In the early 1900s, along with the head tax, curfews were imposed on Chinese workers, where they were not allowed to be out on the main streets after certain hours. The hidden alleyways allowed people to move around and socialize after the curfew. Here are some examples of some of the alleyway spaces. So some of the alleyways have been refurbished a bit, painted over, but still exist as pathways for people to get around. This is Fantan Alley in Victoria. It's the narrowest alley and oldest alley in Victoria's Chinatown. And currently some of these shops here they've been repurposed. They're, like smaller art spaces or clothing shops. So as I was like walking through these spaces, I was really trying to imagine sort of what it would be like, at the turn of the century, like kind of walking through this space and sort of seeing potentially who I would see. I thought, it was really sort of a magical experience for me. This is Dragon Alley. So some of the spaces are, have been untouched, but then some of them have been refurbished. Dragon Alley was refurbished, and now these yellow spaces here are artist studios. And this is Silk Road. This is another alley space. It's hidden. So I had to go through the back door of a business to get into this alley space. And this is one of the alleyways that hasn't been refurbished. Yeah, so like just sort of being in the space, really trying to imagine, what it would be like, sort of walking through it. So next I'm going to talk a bit about family associations. So family associations were formed in the early 1900s to help support family members who immigrated from, the southern part of China. The association supported newcomers by providing them with boarding, job support, and English classes. Today, the associations do not function in the way that they used to. Right now they're kind of more like social clubs. So I had the opportunity to go into some of these association buildings, and when I walked into a lot of them, I was really sort of surprised by how much history like these spaces hold, and I sort of see them as these caretakers of this history. So I was really interested and wanted to talk to some of the family members about these spaces and to talk a bit about sort of their history. Oftentimes the associations would own the buildings that they are in. So they didn't feel the forces of the city coming down on them to relocate because they own their own properties, which is really important so that when we think about Chinatown today. I also photographed a couple of the Freemasons. They kind of worked similarly or function similarly to family associations, and you know, sort of its main purpose is really to support the community. So next, I'd like to talk a bit about lost places. So with the decline of many of the urban Chinatowns, I noticed an increase in the number of vacant properties. As part of the project, I think it's important to highlight these spaces as they are in transition. Sadly, they'll either disappear or eventually turn into something else. So I was really interested in also wanting to document this transition period of what these spaces might be like. This is Fu Ho's restaurant. I had the opportunity to have dinner in this space in 2013, I think. It was really lovely. Ho Printers, was one of the oldest printers in Vancouver's Chinatown, over 100 years old. And I think the family decided to let it go, I think in around 2013, 2012. So just jumping cities here a bit, going to Edmonton, this is the Buffet China Cafe. It's no longer there. And also the next set of images from Edmonton are spaces that are no longer there. And these spaces were on 102 Avenue. I talked about earlier the fact that the city of Edmonton is building an LRT on 102 Avenue. So a lot of these spaces have closed and have been demolished. So like this space here, Jinli BBQ, and the United Grocers, and the Lee Community Association, they're all gone. Oops, sorry. I'll stop there for a moment. And then just jumping back to Toronto, this is the Moonly Co. It's a really popular barbecue shop in Toronto's Chinatown on Dundas Street, and now it's a independent coffee shop. This is Asian Tropical Tours. It was vacant for like over 10 years, and just recently, I think it's turning into a karaoke bar. So it's nice to sort of see the space sort of being sort of lively again. Back to Edmonton, this is the Chinatown Mall. It's just off of 102, I think. I think it's on Jasper Street. And I think this place got demolished as well. So I know we're running short on time. This is my last category. And I called it spaces in flux. So, you know, often I was taking photographs of spaces that are kind of in transition, and this sort of ties off of that a bit. So looking at documented spaces at one point, but then also revisiting them and seeing if there is change. So this is an interior view of the Forest View Chinese restaurant, and I took this in 2010. And just wanted to say, before I was working on the Chinatown project, I was working on a Chinese restaurant project. I was looking at the interiors of Chinese restaurants, particularly banquet style restaurants, because I thought they were really fascinating as places of social gathering. So this is the interior of that space. It closed actually in around 2012. So this is the exterior of that restaurant, and the restaurant was on the top floor that you see there. And then on the hoarding, you see the sign "Coming Soon," you know, and there's a little symbol there. It's a RBC symbol, and that's that space in 2017. So like you're seeing this evolution of the space from a, you know, like this prominent banquet style Cantonese restaurant into, you know, like this more corporate RBC space. It's interesting how they kept the sort of the decoration of the tiling, or mimic that in this case. This is 233-235 Spadina Avenue. I was really interested in this space because it's this, like this Victoria home on Spadina next to these larger garment factory spaces, and I thought it was interesting that the home still existed in Chinatown. So I was really interested in seeing it, and also the density of the signage on the Victorian home. This is it a year later, and just noticing the subtle change of signage. So I'm just going to go back one and then go forward again. So you're seeing, these subtle changes of businesses switching hands. And then this is it in 2016. And again, there are also, a bunch of other subtle changes happening as well. And today there are a couple other new spaces in this particular spot. More recently, a long-standing bakery on Spadina Avenue, Farama Cake and Dessert Garden, recently closed. I think the family wanted to retire, and like I've known this place since I was a teenager, and it's gone. So, but luckily another bakery sort of came into it, the Hong Kong Island Dim Sum House, which actually is another long-standing bakery in Toronto's Chinatown. They just moved locations to the Farama space, and you can see just by the date here, it's just like a 1 month turnover from the one space to the next. But at the same time, there are these histories that are shifting. And then this is the Daisy Garden restaurant in Vancouver in 2014. There was a fire on the roof there, and it damaged the building quite substantially, and I don't think it was salvageable. So in 2015, this is what that space looks like. I think that restaurant really had really amazing soups. I really love that space. I think this is the last set of images. The Lao Tu mural. The Lao Tu mural was commissioned by the Lee Family Association as well as the city of Vancouver to commemorate Vancouver's 125th anniversary in 2010. And it's like at the time, it was really this prominent sort of signage of Vancouver's Chinatown when I was there, and really wanted to photograph it. And I was interested in juxtaposing it with just the framing of the image with this empty parking lot. And then there's the smaller building here with the sold sign on it, and really thinking about what might happen to the parking lot and the mural. So coming back to it in 2016, the property owners of the parking lot, announced that they're developing a larger story building on that space. So they started construction 2015, 2016. And obviously I was a bit concerned about, what would happen to the mural. And so that's a space in 2017. So it's completely covered up. The mural's still there. I think it was damaged in part of the construction of this building, but it's still there on top of the Lee Family Association. It's inaccessible, so you can't really see it. So I don't know, it's just sort of like an interesting cycle to sort of see that happen. And that's it. Let me say thank you. This is myself and Maurice Lee. Maurice Lee at the time was the president of the Lee Family Association, and we just posed in front of the mural 2014. And sorry, there's one more slide. So this is the camera that I used to take a lot of photographs. It's a large format camera, and it's a very slow camera. So I'm very when I'm photographing, I'm like standing in a spot for like half an hour just trying to get the shot going. But I think we might talk about that a bit later. So I'll end there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Morris. I'm just going to jump back on for a second here. Wonderful. So thank you so much for your amazing presentation. And just before we open it up to audience questions, we did want to give the artists a chance to respond to each other's amazing presentations and come together for a bit of an informal conversation. So I'm going to add Suzanne Girard back in, and I will leave it to you two.
Okay, just a little question for Morris, because extensive research is happening in your project. So can you just describe briefly, like the process? How do you find these areas? You do research online? You contact with people? How's your process, like the actual putting it together?
Yeah, I mean, it's through a number of different avenues, obviously online, through connecting with a lot of people. There's a lot of people who I really have to thank for sort of supporting me in this project. A lot of people that I really have to thank. Just because like I wouldn't be able to get access to a lot of places that I'm taking photographs of, and like the knowledge that sort of was shared, inherent knowledge that was shared was really important to me in terms of understanding the community history, especially when I'm not from a lot of the cities that I'm visiting, right? And like in the earlier on in the presentation, there was an image of Jane's Tea Shop, and the way that I accessed the Market Alley space was actually through a fellow exhibitor, Jim Wong Chu, and I met Jim in 2013. Like on my first day that I was in Vancouver, and we spent like several days together, and we sort of went through Chinatown, went to Richmond, and it was really valuable to me to sort of see his perspective and to understand Vancouver's Chinatown that way. So there's a lot of moving parts when I'm trying to do the research, and there's no one specific way or methodology of working.
No, because I know as a photographer, all that is entailed when because we see your images, poof, you're inside, but it's like one image, even if it's a half an hour, it can take days and weeks and months and even years to plan. So I know there's a lot of work entailed. It's very good work.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, thank you. Suzanne, I really loved your images. I thought they were really compelling, and just sort of like seeing this history of Montreal's Chinatown. And I think when I was when I was researching the different Chinatowns, like I couldn't really access, or like I didn't really get a sense of, the visual history of Chinatown. So seeing your images of Montreal's Chinatown are really important to me in terms of like understanding how sort of the history of that community space. Can you talk a bit about like your process in terms of like, I know like you worked with a team, but just in terms of like, how you decided to take the photographs, and what was your approach?
Well, the photographing that area, especially, because we went to Marik and me and Gilbert, we went to Cégep in that, it was downtown, like and it was close to Chinatown. Marik actually lived there, had a lot of friends, artist friends who lived there. So it was a place visited a lot. And of course, like, a lot of people, the food brought me there. And I'm an early person, like it's evident to you too, because a lot of your images are void of people. So I like that even though like we're in the COVID, I was talking about that earlier, and my images, a lot of my images recently, they're a bit different than what I did 40 years ago, are really void of people. And I laughed when I saw all these images in newspapers saying, look at what COVID has done, nobody's there. And all my images have always been like that. And I can see you too. But it was funny too, because sometimes I see a little bit of snow, and then in your images, I see a little bit of snow. So it denotes that, the time of year. Rarely, I have images I've taken in winter, but there's bulk and bulk and bulk, and they're not a lot. The majority of those, all of those images, not the majority, all of them were done in negative. So, and in boxes, and the filing systems was by year. The project, some images were filed in the project. I had a lot of boxes mixed up with a lot of prints, a lot of research stuff. So what happened when, thank God, Karen came along, so it sort of like made me open up. This is like retirement projects we have, right, as photographers, to go into those boxes and saying, okay, what's happening? And I realized my memory is a bit shot. Marik brings back the memories. Sometimes she remembers things, I do. The advantage of working in teams is that you put your memories together to come with a project. Well, basically that's what Karen did. She put all these people's memories together, which is grand. And it brings this force to this project, which I find interesting. So, and I worked in small formats, but sometimes with tripods, without tripods. Marik was working in bigger formats. She was working actually in 2 1/4, always on a tripod, because back then she was into that and I was into small formats. So it has changed. My practice has changed. First, I'll do a lot more digital than I used to. Well, I didn't do any digital back then. There was none. And the process were totally different. So, but it was an advantage. And the whole reason we got involved into this project is because it was a project that was initially presented to by Kwok, to Philip Lim, who used to be our teacher in CEGEP. And it was presented as a student project to the students. And it was a period in photography where the social documentary, which is very strong in Quebec at that point, sort of started to go away and people started to become more formal, more studio, more, you know, and more involved, like artistic in the sense, not that our documentary isn't, but it was more towards that. And it was refused by the students. Nobody wanted it. The doors were open, you could go in. I didn't have to do that work of research, okay? We didn't. And so we were social documentary photographers and we just jumped on it. It was like an opportunity of a lifetime. And, you know, we got a lot of images and a lot of opportunities, but right now, as an individual, as a person, as a white woman, I mean, I would probably not be able to go in there. You know, it's like, I would have to do a lot of work, but I know I would go through the association and I would have more, you know, knowledge, but I met wonderful people and I met a lot of people through work when I worked at the Chinese Film Festival too. So, and I got to get a lot of like personal archives and, you know, photograph head tax certificates and everything. This is another project. It's not part of the Kwok project. So, but it's interesting the way that, you know, the links people create and they just pass it on and the way people are so open. That is interesting. You must have noticed that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely, yeah, it's, you know, that process of sort of feeling comfortable and building trust, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. So just Jazz here. I'm going to jump on again just with my voice because I see we have a few questions for us in the Q&A and I thought now might be a good time to transition. And actually to kick us off, we actually have Karen Tam, who is of course the curator of Whose Chinatown at Griffin, who's going to be joining for the Q&A. So Karen, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hey, Karen.
Hi, Suzanne. Thank you so much for your presentations. It was wonderful to listen to and to kind of hear you go more in depth and to share like other images which I hadn't seen. Some, of course, that you had shared with me previously, but aren't in the exhibition. I wanted to say, like, I had a few questions, but first I wanted to say my dad's been completely inspired by your works, by the work of Jim Wong Chu, Fred Herzog, Paul Yi, Marie Boudreau as well, when I showed him all the photographs. And so what he's been doing the past year is because him and my mom, they visit my grandmother in Chinatown, Montreal, Chinatown, 3 times a week. So he just brings his camera. Photos of everything. Because like when I showed your photos, he was like, oh, like, that's okay it doesn't have to be like I don't know, a person in, you know, as the subject. I can just take, you know, just photographs and to document how Chinatown has changed, like, I guess over the past year. So yeah, I wanted to just share that my dad's been inspired by your work. Also, I guess, so one question for Suzanne is that, I guess, like, since you talked about the process where, you know, all that work had already been done in a way where approaching like the associations and the residents, has that process informed how you have worked in the subsequent project? No, what I mean by like, is that you would then approach and get in contact and conversations with other groups in your other projects?
It sort of comes naturally. The more you do, the more people you see, the more contact you do. So, and you know, I think what happens is projects successively just follow each other depending on what you do or what you're involved in. So like when I was involved in the Chinese Film Festival, I met a whole other group of people that weren't involved with the family associations in Chinatown and other people that had other histories which were wonderful. You know, I met people that actually their grandparents grew up there and they had the family album of the kids on this, you know what I mean? It was like this whole thing, which wasn't even tied to the first group of people I worked with. This is because I worked on another project.
Right.
So I think photographers are, yes, and because I did a lot of other things too, I sort of swayed. I've done a lot of other things apart from photography. That that type of project was basically, I have an ongoing project, but that type where you go in, you mix with people, I haven't really done another one like that I recall, like that intensive and that focused. So it's not, because I was involved in other things. That's about it.
Right, right.
But I have, Karen, I have loads of other things you would be interested in if ever it comes to Montreal.
This summer, we'll meet up this summer.
Okay.
And then for Morris, I mean, I know that this year has been tough for everybody, and I know it's been tough for you as well. But I was wondering if you had been able to kind of continue working and documenting Toronto's Chinatown during the pandemic.
I've been slowly picking up, working again in Chinatown. Like I was just shooting yesterday, which is really great. I met 2 new people on the street just because I was photographing, and one gentleman had said that he had photographed Chinatown in the 70s with his 35. So I'm really interested in talking to him a bit more about the work that he did. So yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, you know, I'm starting to pick back up in terms of working again. Yeah.
Great. Thank you both. I have more questions, but I can ask you privately.
So much, Karen, and thanks, Morris and Suzanne. So I do have a couple questions for us, which I'll just read out here. But the first is from an audience member, and it's for both Morris and Suzanne. And the question is, will you eventually archive all of your photographs in various museums, libraries, or universities so that their historic value is preserved for our Chinese-Canadian history?
Well, our Mike and me were already, our images of Chinatown are already part of the Canadian archives in Ottawa. So that was, we submitted them like way just after the project. I think about the same time Kwok's book came out. So that part, but presently it's things you think about. You know, archives are happening. I'm getting older, I'm going to croak, but apparently, like Maddie said, listen, Suzanne, there's tons of photographers that are thinking the same thing and nobody wants them. Sometimes she says this and then the next day she goes, well, we should do something. Because you get stock of photography, photos, but and it's a bit different, even if it's so fleeting. It's like ephemeral. If you go on the web, if you go on Instagram, there's nothing like a good book, eh, Morris?
Yeah, yeah.
How about you? Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that question was from Arlene, and I just want to say Arlene has been really a big supporter of my work, and I really value her knowledge. But to answer the question, Arlene, yeah, I've definitely been thinking about that quite a bit, especially since I've been sort of trying to organize all the images that I have, and I'm still in the process of organizing the images and categorizing them. And it is something that I think I would like to do in the future. So, it's always in the back of my mind while I'm sort of organizing the work and while I'm still, photographing the work. And I think, this project, like the project for me, is very much ongoing. So I'm working on it.
Thank you. Okay, so we have one last question, and this one is for Morris. So Morris, you developed the list of 4 categories to focus your photographs. What was your process for making this short list?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, what my interests were leaning towards, and I was just trying to figure out a way of organizing my thoughts and figure out a way of organizing my observations of Chinatown, and those were the ways at the time, and currently still, like the ways that I've been thinking about looking at Chinatowns. But I think, you know, there will be more categories popping up in the future. Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Morris. So I'm going to jump back on here just to say a huge, massive thanks on behalf of the Griffin team for your amazing presentations today. It was just so wonderful to learn more about your works and to get to see all of those photographs as you went through your slides. So thank you so much for the time that you put into your presentations today. So wonderful to hear from you both.
And thank you, Jazz. You're so great.
Oh, thank you, Jess.
Thank you. No, a huge thanks to you. And thanks to everyone who joined us today on this Sunday afternoon for our final virtual event of the Whose Chinatown exhibition. And as I mentioned at the start, the exhibition is out for one more week. Griffin is open on Fridays and Saturdays regularly, but next weekend we're also open on the Sunday. So we have that one extra day. And so if you haven't had a chance to stop by the exhibition, we do hope that you do so next weekend. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.